Alright, I'm going to try to record this so that I can upload it later. So, thank you all for coming to the Kaiju Video Games History panel. I'll tell you a little bit about who I am and why I'm speaking about video games. So I'm Alex Rushdy. I'm a lifelong Kaiju fan, Tokusatsu fan, and of course a video game fan. I've made it my raison d'etre to find and catalog every single Kaiju or Tokusatsu video game in existence. And if you want to check out my kind of progress in this pursuit, you can visit my blog, controlallmonsters.com. I also run Seismic Toys, which is a kind of designer independent toy company that produces soft vinyl toys. You can find us in the deals room. And lastly, I'm the CEO of an independent video game company, 13AM Games. That last one's probably the most relevant here. So when I give an opinion about video games, I can actually say it's my professional opinion. So I've been in the video game industry for over 8 years now, and over those years, my studios released Runbow, that was our first game, Pirate Pop Plus, and Double Cross across multiple consoles and PC, but it's probably our most recent game that is the most relevant to this convention's interests, Dawn of the Monsters. Thank you. So it's a co-op Kaiju beat 'em up. It's available on all major platforms, and it was actually announced at the last G-Fest 3 years ago. So that's when we first unveiled it, and now it's out, which is pretty cool. So this panel is actually a sequel to a panel that I did 3 years ago at G-Fest. I thought I'd be coming back the next year to give the sequel panel, but here we are. So, you know, if you're interested in that and you haven't checked it out yet, you can go to controlallmonsters.com or you can check out my YouTube channel. I recorded and uploaded the whole panel. The general idea of the panel was, I would hear a lot of people online saying stuff like, oh, I wish there were more Kaiju games, or there's not enough Kaiju games. And my response was like, no, there's actually a ton. There's no shortage. So in that panel, I highlighted over 100 video games, the vast majority of which didn't have Godzilla, Gamera, or Ultraman in them. So I just wanted to give people a taste of how many games there were. And this panel is just keeping more onto that pile. So, you know, I think we're past the 200 mark by the time this will be done, and there's still loads of video games that I haven't even talked about yet. So yeah, again, I would hear from people that there aren't a lot of Kaiju games, but that's really, you know, couldn't be farther from the truth. The reality is that there's way too many Kaiju games, and there's Kaiju games in pretty much every video game genre in existence, and some of these Kaiju games are actually like pretty important for the history of the art form of interactive digital media, or they try something new or unique that other games kind of build upon. So, like, for example, there's a certain game that involves a giant ape scaling a tower with a buxom blonde in hand, and that's not King Kong, but that's Donkey Kong. And Donkey Kong was so inspired by King Kong that it led to a lawsuit from Universal, which Universal promptly lost, thank God. So a little bit about, you know, some of the terms I'm going to be using for those who haven't seen the previous panel. I'm going to be talking about developers and publishers. Video games are quite different from films or television shows and how they're produced, in that you have the developers. These are the actual programmers, artists, designers who work on the game itself. And you have the publishers, which are the large companies that distribute, market, and fund these games. So even within a company like Nintendo, right? Nintendo is a publisher, and then they have multiple teams that work on different games. So for example, HAL Laboratories works on Super Smash Bros. Retro Studios works on Metroid. So, you know, just when I'm going to list in every single piece, I'm going to list who developed it and who published it. Of course, we have to answer that age-old question of, like, what is a kaiju? That always seems to be a messy word with a ton of debate. You know, do they need to be Japanese? Do they need to be not Japanese? all sorts of things to consider. I'm going to opt for a pretty loose interpretation of the word kaiju here. I'm focused more on aesthetics, so Japanese-inspired giant monsters. But I'm also allowing kind of peripheral things when appropriate. General giant monster films, or giant superheroes like Ultraman, all that kind of stuff. I'm just going to kind of lump them together in terms of what I think people who like kaiju movies will also dig. So yeah, Yongari counts, even though he's Korean. And what is a video game? As I went through this search, that becomes its own kind of messy thing to try to define. So essentially, if it is a device for play, utilizes a screen and uses electronic components, I'm counting it. Sometimes I'll veer off into things like pinball because pinball is great. I'm basically just excluding like board games and toys like Rock'em Sock'em Robots. Also, further definitions. I swear I'm going to get to the game soon. I'm trying to cast a wide net, but there's some topics I'm just not going to touch in order to keep us time efficient and allow some time for questions. So Pokemon and Digimon and other monster collecting games are off limits for now. That's a whole other panel. There's just too many of them. So unless it's explicitly a kaiju monster collecting game, I'm not going to talk about it. Second, I'm trying to uncover games that you haven't heard of before, so I'm not going to talk about the Pipeworks games. I'm not going to talk about, anything that's recent or anything that everyone already knows, like Super Godzilla. A lot of people already know that game. I'm not going to mention it. I'll leave those to a future panel so I can dig deep into the total history of those. Next is giant robots. It's an incredibly popular topic for video games, so I'm leaving these out unless there's a very good reason to include them, like, for example, the Pacific Rim video game. And lastly are tokusatsu heroes, like, human-sized ones, like Power Rangers and Kamen Rider. That's a whole other panel. I'm going to leave most of those off. So to start off, I'd like to talk about King Kong video games, because one of the things that I was told immediately after the last panel was like, there are more King Kong video games than you listed. And then I did some research, and over the course of the pandemic, I published 2 articles on my blog about King Kong games, because there are a lot more than I realized. So if you want like the full deep dive, feel free to go on the blog and read that, but I'll just kind of briefly go over the ones I found. So the actual first King Kong video game is this one here from Tiger Electronics. And it's basically a Donkey Kong clone for LCD screens. This game actually predates the Nintendo Game & Watch version of Donkey Kong, which wouldn't release until 1982. However, once Universal lost their lawsuit against Nintendo, alleging that Donkey Kong was infringing on the King Kong copyright, Nintendo won that, and then they countersued, saying that these games ripped off Donkey Kong, and they were right, and they won. So Tiger released several variants of this unit, but the first and most popular was a simple Donkey Kong variant in a blue tabletop device you see on the bottom left there. So these 2 King Kong LCD games are actually from Japan, and they're created by Epoch, a software company that's famous for creating Japan's first cartridge-based video game system. So in 1982, they released these King Kong LCD games in Japan and Europe. And surprisingly, these aren't Donkey Kong clones at all, but instead are original games that take place during 2 key scenes from the 1976 Dino De Laurentiis Con. Those key scenes being the final battle on top of the World Trade Center and the scene where Duan is showering in the waterfall. Why they picked that one, I don't really know, but you can kind of see it playing out there as he's protecting her from logs. I should mention that the trademark of the King Kong name seems a bit more nebulous in Japan, similar to how the name Jaws isn't as strictly monitored over there, so I can't confirm it, but it's likely that these are actually unlicensed King Kong games. So Tiger, who created the first King Kong video game, they decided to take their King Kong license that they had into the newfangled world of cartridge video games. And they established Tiger Vision, a sub-company, to create television video games, and their very first title was King Kong. Surprise, surprise, it's a clone of Donkey Kong. Well, a clone of only the first level, kind of. You have to move to the top of the screen, just like in Donkey Kong, but the difference is that the the barrels, they're bombs that King Kong throws at you have a chance of being magic, meaning jumping over them pops you up a level. It's a pretty weird game, and it's what's strange about this is that this version of the game then got sub-licensed to another company, and they made it into another LCG game. So I'm not going to go into all of these because the Nintendo versus Universal lawsuit, coupled with the success of Donkey Kong, led to a smorgasbord of Kong-like games. I go into detail on each one on my blog, but here's just a sampling of a few of them. Kong Man is actually an electronic toy of some kind, but it's interesting in that it uses the Mechanicon design. And Crazy Kong is an official bootleg licensed by Nintendo. They just didn't have enough Donkey Kong arcade units, so they asked someone to make bootlegs under the table, and it exists. That's never getting re-released, so if you find a cabinet, give it a shot. So the 90s was an empty decade for King Kong video games, but in 2002 we got the first new one in a very long time. It was made to capitalize off of the television show from BKN, Kong the Animated Series, is effectively a poor man's Donkey Kong Country. The developer, Planet Interactive, mostly produced portable licensed fare, and BAM Entertainment, the publisher, they mostly just published cheap licensed games. And they both went bankrupt shortly after this game released. The opening of the game also references a company called Planet Canada, but I cannot find any information about what that company was or what they did. So in 2005, released in tandem with the direct-to-video animated film of the same name, Kong, King of Atlantis is the ape's second Game Boy Advance title. Unfortunately, it doesn't fare better than the previous title, and it's just a simple but very rough platformer. It has an interesting idea in that you play as Jason, who's the main human character of the series, and you run through a level, and then you transform into Kong, and you run through the same level, but now you're much bigger. While Majesco, the publisher, is pretty famous or infamous as a publisher, the developer Skyworks is not as well known. That's King of Atlantis. So far, King Kong's video game history is not that great. I can't really recommend any of these games. But then we start getting into really, really good stuff. So the last Game Boy Advance King Kong game is Ubisoft's game based off of the Peter Jackson movie. And right off the bat, the production quality outshines any previous 2D King Kong game. The opening cutscenes are all hand-drawn with colorful sprite work, and it almost makes you wish there was an animated adaptation of King Kong. Oh wait, there was. Never mind, I take that back. I'm sorry. So the gameplay flips back and forth between top-down Zelda-like segments where you control Jack, Ann, and Carl, and beat-em-up segments where you actually get to play as Kong himself. The gameplay balance is actually really fun, going from human to Kong and back. But a similar balance was struck in its even better home console Big Brother. Not that one. So, Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official game of the movie. Yeah. So, the full official title is Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official game of the movie. It's a mouthful. We'll just call it King Kong. And it was developed by the A-team at Ubisoft, spearheaded by Rayman creator Michel Ancel. And it was supervised closely by Peter Jackson himself. So it's one part first-person shooter set on Skull Island, and one part beat-em-up as Kong. I go into significantly more detail on my blog in a pretty extensive article, but I need to say that this is one of the greatest kaiju games of all time, and undoubtedly one of the best licensed games of all time. The game was actually so influential for Ubisoft that all the ideas presented in this game ended up finding their way into games that everyone knows, like Assassin's Creed and Far Cry, which is now their bread and butter. So a lot of the ideas that built those games first started in a licensed King Kong game, believe it or not. It offers a totally different perspective on the film, showing you more of the side characters, more dinosaurs, and it even offers an alternate good ending that you can unlock where Kong doesn't have to die. It even has the full voice cast from the film reprising their roles. Seriously, if you love King Kong, I can't recommend this game enough. And the good news is it's dirt cheap. You can find copies on Xbox, PS2, GameCube, or 360 for $5 to $10. It used to be backwards compatible on Series X, but it got removed for some reason that I don't know. It's because it's too good. I think that's definitely the reason. Yep. Oh, the film, yeah. It would have been a very different game. Yeah. No, they definitely weren't. But, yeah, so, you know, this game, like I said, it's good on pretty much any version that you've got. Just don't bother with the PSP or DS versions. Those are terrible. Yeah, if you haven't played this game, you're a Kong fan, go grab it. Question? Is there a reason it never got a what? A re-release? It never got a PS3 release because in 2005 the PS3 wasn't out yet. And, yeah, they just opted to, you know, I'm guessing it was a short license term, and they just kind of released the game, and that was it. So this is one that not a lot of people know about. So Raw Thrills is the largest remaining American manufacturer of arcade video games. And it consists of ex-Midway employees and is co-founded by Eugene Jarvis. If you walk into a local Dave & Buster's, you'll likely see their Jurassic Park, Transformers, or maybe even their recent Rampage game based off the 2018 film. Back in 2019, they unveiled a new licensed title of theirs, King Kong of Skull Island VR. In a first for Raw Thrills, this game uses 4K VR headsets, in-seat speakers, motion seats, air jets, and hand sensors that allow you to interact with Kong and Company. So what's fascinating about this game is that it isn't licensing the Warner Brothers movie Kong Skull Island or even the 1933 film King Kong, but it's instead an adaptation of Joe DeVito's King Kong of Skull Island and Kong of Skull Island books and comic books. DeVito Artworks is credited with a copyright notice on the game, and you can even see elements like the two-headed gaw that Kong fights in the comic book. I haven't had the chance to try this game yet, but it is out. It might be at your local Dave & Buster's. Good luck finding one. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. We got our first review. It's pretty good. So we haven't had a new King Kong game in a long time. There are a lot of collaborations, mobile games, and even casino games featuring the ape. And Kong eventually got a pinball game. He got two of them, in fact, but they're mobile and tabletop. But there is another King Kong pinball game I want to talk about. And I'm presenting it out of order for a reason. So Data East is a Japanese company famous for their arcade and Nintendo games like Bad Dudes vs. Dragon Ninja and Burger Time. And they started making pinball games in 1987 by purchasing Stern Electronics, who in turn got purchased by Sega, who in turn got absorbed into Stern Pinball, who then created the most recent Godzilla pinball, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. Back in the 90s, when Stern was still Data East, they had plans for a King Kong pinball table, and the game was showcased in 1990, but it was never released, and only 9 prototype tables are known to exist in the wild. It's never been clear why it wasn't released, but it looked like a really cool game. You can find videos online. The people who own it have kind of uploaded videos showcasing all the features, and each of the 9 prototypes actually plays differently because they haven't finalized the game yet. So I know what you're thinking. That last game didn't even come out. Does that really count? Well, I have to catalog everything, and in my quest to catalog every Kaiju video game, I've found a few more mysterious and lost Kaiju games that we can look into. So first, I think a lot of people are familiar with this one, but I can hear the sighs. So in 2012, a Kickstarter appeared promising a brand new fully 3D Kaiju fighting game in the vein of the Pipeworks Godzilla games, but this time with even more monsters, including Godzilla, Gamera, Ultraman, Zone Fighter, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and Cthulhu. It also promised online play, DLC, and a series of over 12 games with crossplay, and on top of that, fan-submitted playable Kaiju. All with a Kickstarter goal of only $100,000. If it sounded too good to be true, because it was. For reference, the cheapest game I've ever worked on in my entire career cost $400,000, and it looked nothing like, a big budget AAA fighting game. So the project was spearheaded by Simon Strange, the lead character designer of the Pipeworks Godzilla games. The first game in the proposed 12-part series was Kaiju Land Battles. You can play this on Steam, or at least a demo of it, and you can see where things were headed. Unfortunately, that's as far as the project ever got. Despite a successful Kickstarter, the game was just massive in its scope. It was too big to be made, and it was promising more characters than any existing kaiju fighting game to date. The ambition was huge, but the budget was pretty small, and the talent pool, I don't think, was there to meet it. Trading cards were sold at G-Fest a few years back, and Simon even came to talk about the Godzilla games and Colossal Kaiju Combat, but as of 2017, the games are totally canceled, the forums are gone, and the Kickstarter is no longer updating. There is much more to this saga than I have time to cover in this panel. There's like a multi-hour YouTube video that goes over it if you're interested. But needless to say, we can all pour one out for this ambitious project that sadly will never come to be. So now this mysterious game was first mentioned in a Nintendo Power print ad stating that it was coming in 1991. This was followed up by a preview in issue 16 of Nintendo Power in their Game & Watch section, and that would be the last we'd ever hear of Rodan. So after the success of Godzilla Monster of Monsters for the NES, Toho was preparing to release more games, including, apparently, a game based on Rodan. We never got a clear idea of what the game would be. So given that Monster of Monsters was developed by Compile, it might be safe to assume that it would be an action game. Compile was renowned for their shooting games like Zanak, Musha, and Gunhead, which is actually a shooter based off a Toho film. This being said, video game historian Frank Cifaldi, he posits that the game likely just turned into Godzilla 2 War of the Monsters, which was developed internally at Toho. Godzilla 2 does not appear to have its credits available online that I can find, so I don't even know who developed that game either. I know I said I wasn't going to cover giant robot stuff, but this is a unique exception worth mentioning. So at E3 2014, Nintendo unveiled 3 unique prototype games designed to take advantage of the Wii U hardware: Project Guard, Star Fox, and Project Giant Robot. Star Fox and Project Guard later got released, Star Fox Zero and Star Fox Guard, but Project Giant Robot never surfaced as an actual game. And Project Giant Robot was a fighting game where you could customize your mech and then take them out in battle against other robots one-on-one. The Wii U gamepad would show the cockpit view of your fighter, while the TV had a wider view of the entire fight. The controls were physics-based, leading to a hilarious kind of QWOP-like fighting game, where keeping your balance was just as important as throwing the punch. While Nintendo claimed Project Giant Robot was not intended to be released, and it was simply a design experiment, but we know that isn't entirely true because they said the same thing about Star Fox and Project Guard. And this game was actually listed as an upcoming game on Nintendo's financial reports for years. But this ends on a slightly more positive note than the other games in the last section. While it was officially canceled in 2016, Nintendo released Nintendo Labo in 2018, and one of the kits was a Labo giant robot set that looks pretty similar to this. Yeah, back there.
Well, if I had to wager, I have to say the reason they're wrong is this: because they're great Kaiju. They're a part of their commercial. You guys got tomorrow. I have to say they're because they don't want people to earn money. They're essentially being a bunch of creative chickens.
Yes, I agree. They're being cowards for not releasing this weird-looking game. Now, another game that not a lot of people know is there was a planned Reptilicus game. Reptilicus was supposed to be a VR experience developed by Triband, most famously known for their What the Golf game that released in 2020. And the game was intended to actually give you control of Reptilicus, allowing you to destroy cities and even attack your friends who could play as civilians. And they'd be using regular controllers, and I say that because the game was intended to use what's called the Rococo Smart Suit full body motion capture VR controller. So to play this game, you would have to strap up into a full body suit with sensors on it and move around to I guess, smash your friends. Unfortunately, the game never materialized. even though it appears that the developers actually got permission to use Reptilicus from Nordisk Film, who owns the rights to the character. I saved this game for last because it's the most mysterious game in this whole presentation, and it's at E3 2009, Microsoft unveiled Project Natal, a full-body motion control device for the 360, and one of the key features of the press conference was a product vision trailer that showed off the technology, its application, and even showcased some conceptual software, including Kung Fu sports racing and a Kaiju game. Most of those games ended up becoming real titles, but this game never ended up getting released. So this footage of a boy trashing a city as a giant floppy-eared monster never got made into a full game. Yeah, back there. Yeah. It might be hard to control, but who knows. So now we're back into unlost games. These are games that you can actually find. So the first one here is called Dynowarz, Destruction of Spondylus. So this is an action platformer where you split your time playing as Professor Proteus and the other half of your time as Cyborosaurus, Professor Proteus's giant cyborg dinosaur mech. It's a pretty straightforward action platformer, and it plays kind of like Mega Man or Blaster Master. It's kind of rough around the edges, but it's otherwise simple fun. And interestingly enough, the Nintendo Power poster that you see there was drawn by none other than Yuji Kaida, the famous Godzilla, Gundam, and Ultraman artist. Also, despite this game being released by Bandai and developed by Super Godzilla developers ACC, it only released in North America, not Japan. So add that to the pile with Rampage and Godzilla Unleashed. Now we have the Azito series. So this is a series of Japan-only base-building tower defense games featuring giant robots, superheroes, and of course, kaiju. Unfortunately, none of these got localized and are incredibly complicated and dense. So I can't really recommend you find a copy and try to play it. But they exist, and I have to catalog them. And they're made by developer Aztec 2-1. The series continued, though, after the first game, and they started to be published by Banpresto, which allowed characters from real Tokusatsu shows to appear. And they kind of went all out. We've got Kaider, Giant Robo, Spectre Man, Inazu Man, Condor Man, Go Ranger, Mega Ranger, Rainbow Man, Red Baron, Brain 17, Ultraman, and many, many more. The game is, packed with references. In the 2010s, Hamster Corp obtained the rights for Azito and created two new games, Azito 3D for 3DS and Azito Cross Tatsunoko Legends, featuring heroes and villains from classic Tatsunoko shows like Gatchaman, Casher, and Yato Man. Unfortunately, Azito Cross Tatsunoko Legends was the last entry in the series. Back on the pinball train, in the 1990s, Sega used to make pinball machines, and they developed one based on the 1998 Godzilla film. It's actually a pretty fun table. It's not one of my favorites. And this table is now owned by Stern, who could potentially re-release it digitally as part of Stern Pinball Arcade, but that seems sadly unlikely. It has been in the games room before. I don't know if it's there now, but it is at Galloping Ghost. It is there? Yeah. So you can go play this downstairs. Speaking of Stern, 23 years after they released Godzilla 98, that very same company made a new Godzilla pinball game. So this just released last year, and it's based on the classic Godzilla license featuring, all the Showa Kaiju. And the table is fantastic. If you haven't played it yet, I highly recommend you do. I think this is also in the table in the room downstairs. Yes. Yeah, it is. So definitely recommend checking this out. It's a lot of fun. Really, the only thing that I can say that is bad about it is that it's a pinball table and it costs like $6,000. So, not affordable. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's great. It's another review.
There's this arcade in Arizona.
Yeah, it's a pretty popular table. You can find it. There are websites you can use to actually locate pinball tables, so if you want to try it, I definitely recommend it. Nice. Yeah.
One of the top 10 pinball shows.
Yeah, it's great. I do recommend going downstairs and trying this. It's a lot of fun. And Godzilla wasn't the only kaiju franchise to get a pinball table last year. Ultraman actually got his first pinball table ever, created by the fine folks over at Spooky Pinball. I have not played this one yet. I haven't found a table yet. And they also cost thousands of dollars. So hopefully I'll be able to find one soon. If anyone's played it, let me know. But the art for the table is actually done by Matt Frank, who's here at the con. He's actually over in the dealer's room. So this is another kind of strategy game in the vein of like Fire Emblem. Super Tokusatsu Taisen 2001 is basically a Tokusatsu version of the Super Robot Wars series. It crosses over an impressive number of Tokusatsu heroes alongside some completely original characters in a kind of Fire Emblem tactics game. Interestingly enough, this is one of the few Tokusatsu games I know of that lets you control not just the superheroes, but their human alter egos and their teammates. For example, you can control the Ultra Garrison, including Ann, Amagi, Dan, Furuhashi, and Soga in battle, as well as Ultra 7. Now, there are a few games that I missed on my last presentation that I caught some flack for, and I think the biggest one was War of the Monsters. Hands up if you've played this game before. All right, yeah, decent amount. So Incognito Entertainment was a studio comprised of former Single Track Studios alumni, the people responsible for Twisted Metal. And they began working on War of the Monsters in early 2001, once Twisted Metal production kind of wound down. The game originally had a grittier and darker art style, but the events of 9/11 actually made them shelve the project. And they brought it back a few years later with a goofier, more comedic art style that kind of saved the project from being doomed to oblivion. The characters in the game are kind of closer to King Kong size as opposed to Godzilla size, and believe it or not, this is why the game was an original title, because at one point in development, they were offered the Godzilla license. But Toho demanded that Godzilla be over 100 meters tall, which totally ruined the gameplay of the game. As, in this game, you can scale buildings, you can climb, you can do all sorts of stuff. And they basically said, no, we're good, we'll just make our own game. And that led to the Pipeworks games getting made. If they'd have said yes, we wouldn't have got Godzilla Destroy Monsters Melee. There was also apparently a planned 50-foot woman character named Atomica, but she was scrapped when the developers couldn't make her feel big. It just felt like you're controlling a regular lady. So yeah, it's a 3D arena fighting game with 10 playable monsters, survival mode, all sorts of stuff. This game's great. It's got a great selection of monsters. It has a real nice 1950s drive-in B-movie vibe, and it's pretty accessible. So you can play the PS2 version is not very expensive, but you can also pick it up in HD on PS4 for like $10. For now, because we're at the halfway point, I'll save questions until the end. So if you got a question or something, we'll go over them at the end. I gotta make sure to get through all of these. We're getting into the weird stuff, okay? I want to find the weird stuff for you guys. So this game, so this game is developed by Tamsoft, who are known for One Chambara and Senran Kagura. This game is called Demolition Girl, and it was released in Japan as part of D3 Publishers' budget Simple 2000 series of games for the PS2 under the name Daibijin, which is a play on Daimajin. Daibijin basically just means big, beautiful woman. So the story of this game is about a model that's on the beach taking photos, and she gets attacked by an alien that stings her. She passes out. When she wakes up, she's like 50 feet tall. You then have to operate helicopters, jets, and tanks to prevent her from destroying the city, and eventually turn her back to normal size, all while fighting evil aliens and like recording her measurements. This is a weird and janky game. It's not very good. It's Mr. Mosquito is a much better game. So despite the surface comparisons to Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, it features a few allusions to classic kaiju movies. Like when you tranquilize the big lady, she gets carried away by choppers like King Kong vs. Godzilla. So this one is only playable in English via a PAL region release, but there is no North American version, but it's pretty easy to like emulate or import. This is another game that I think is pretty well known. So Team Eco, well known for Eco and now for The Last Guardian, developed Shadow of the Colossus for the PS2 in 2005. The game sees you traveling a vast realm in search of 16 colossi to take down in hopes of reviving a young woman. The game was directed by Fumito Ueda, a former animator at Warp who worked on D and Enemy Zero under Kenji Eno. While at first glance some might not consider this a kaiju game, and that's certainly understandable, it not only features 16 kaiju-sized beasts to take down, it also features an incredible musical score by Ko Otani, who was chosen for this game because of his work composing music for the 90s Gamera trilogy and for Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack. The game is critically acclaimed. It's available on PS2, it's available on PS3, and there's a remake on PS4. While, it may not scratch the giant monster itch that you're looking for usually with a kaiju game, I can really recommend it. It's super high quality, and it's a pretty unique experience. Eat Them. I'm glad someone knows Eat Them. So Eat Them released for PS3 in 2010 as a download-only title on the PlayStation Network. The story of the game is that a corporation unveils a new product, giant monsters that can be used as efficient demolition crews. Unfortunately, a mad scientist hijacks their plans and turns the monsters into, monsters. They just go wild. And you can control that monster and play through 50-plus missions of destruction, smashing buildings, eating civilians, and unlocking monster parts that you can use to customize your creature. Due to it being download-only, this title is a bit tricky to get your hands on, but the game is somehow miraculously still available for purchase on the PlayStation 3 PlayStation Network. Even though the developer is long gone, you can get the game for $10. There's even a demo. Just keep in mind that in order to buy games on the PS3 PlayStation Network right now, you have to preload your wallet in a web browser, and then you have to boot up your PS3 and buy the game through the PlayStation Store on your PS3. It's needlessly convoluted. I don't know why. Yeah, sometimes it's very slow store, but it worked. Trust me, I downloaded it, I checked right before the con, it's still up. If you're a fan of Rampage, definitely recommend it. Okay, so Pacific Rim, the video game. So this game is developed by Yuke's, which is a Japanese developer most well known for their wrestling games. For years, they developed all the official WWE titles. However, they also developed Earth Defense Force Iron Rain and Earth Defense Force World Brothers. In 2013, they released this game on the Xbox 360 and many months later on PS3 as a digital download title. It also apparently released on PC, but I can find no evidence that that actually happened. The game's a simple 3D one-on-one fighting game that's surprisingly faithful to the film and allows you to play as almost every Jaeger and Kaiju that appears in the film. Due to it being download-only, it was fairly inexpensive at launch, but it also had a steady stream of DLC. Some big, some small, but at the end of the day, getting the full playable cast and all features ended up costing about as much as a retail game. You'll notice I'm not talking a lot about the gameplay, and that's because of one major issue with the game. It was download-only, and now it is completely delisted, and you cannot purchase it anywhere. I didn't pick it up at launch because I didn't have a 360, and then I didn't even know it released on PS3 until 2 years ago. So the game was delisted in 2015. Unfortunately, it was only up for 2 years. It's now lost. So the options to play this are to hack your PS3 and load it on there, or to emulate it on your PC. It's a shame because it's, definitely the best Pacific Rim video game, but it's not the only Pacific Rim video game. Yeah. So now we've got Pacific Rim, the mobile game, which was released at the same time as the console game. It's essentially a kaiju reskin of the game Infinity Blade, for those who are familiar, which in and of itself is basically a touchscreen version of Punch-Out. You select and upgrade Jaegers and fight through kaiju boss battles as the difficulty increases. It was pretty fun in short bursts. However, like other digital-only games, it is lost to time. It was delisted ages ago. I'm sure you could find the APK online. But what's cool about this game is it actually featured unique and modified kaiju that haven't been seen in other Pacific Rim TV shows or games.
I remember this game when it came out.
Yeah, I used to have it on my phone. I deleted it, and now I can't get it anymore. But hey, look, there's another Pacific Rim game, Breach Wars. Unfortunately, this is also delisted, so every Pacific Rim game is now lost to time. Pour one out for Pacific Rim video games. This game is kind of like Puzzle Quest, those types of games. What was cool about it is it also had a unique cast of Kaiju and Jaegers. So it had all the Kaiju and Jaegers from Pacific Rim and Pacific Rim Uprising, and then it had some unique new ones as well. But yeah, it's gone. So, maybe I should have put these in the lost game section. Here's a unique one that not a lot of people know about. So I actually stumbled upon this in person at an arcade, and I was surprised that I hadn't known about it. So Monster Eye is created by a company called IGS. They're a Taiwanese arcade game manufacturer that's been around since 1991, and they've created some incredible games that you can actually play at Galloping Ghost in Brookfield, Illinois. In 2014, they unveiled Monster Eye. It's a deluxe cabinet arcade rail shooting game in a similar vein to House of the Dead. It featured Kinect-style body motion control sequences and fans that would mimic the breaths of the monster as they screamed at you. It's pretty cool. The game got a sequel in 2019 that's pretty similar, but with different fights. Both games are fun, and they take a lot of cues from Legendary's Monsterverse. Like that's from the game, even though it's clearly the teaser trailer for 2014. But I guess they don't really care if anyone thinks they copied it. There's no Godzilla arcade game, so this is what we've got. Yeah, really fun. If you ever see one in the wild, definitely worth playing. Vanillaware, famous for Odin's Sphere, Muramasa's Blade, and Dragon's Crown, released this hybrid RTS and visual novel game about mechs, kaiju, and time travel. It got very positive reviews, like universally critically acclaimed, but I actually haven't even opened my copy yet. I've had it for like a year. I have too many games to play. It might not be what you expect from a kaiju game, but it still fits the bill, and it's supposed to be fantastic, and it just released on Nintendo Switch earlier this year, so it's available on PS4 and Switch. This is another very recent release, Gigapocalypse, released in early access last fall, and it's a kind of mix between a side-scrolling shooter, a tower defense or offense game, resource management, and a Tamagotchi. You actually take care of your monster like a pet. You have to feed them and clean up their poop and stuff. Early access reviews have been really good, but the console release of the game has been slightly delayed to August or possibly September. And I finally get to talk about my own game in one of these panels, which is great. But I'm not going to spend much time talking about it because there's a panel later today. So quickly, Dawn of the Monsters is a 2-player cooperative kaiju beat-em-up where you control 4 titans across 35 missions around the globe. It's got unlockable moves, DNA augments, a whole bunch of secrets, and voice acting talents from Christina V, Xander Mobus, and Patrick Seitz, who have worked on Godzilla Singular Point, and Smash Bros, and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. It's got guest star from Yuji Kaida, Shinji Nishikawa, Matt Frank, EJ Sear, and many more. And it's available now on all platforms. So if you haven't bought it, please do. Shameless plug done. On with the show. There was another kaiju game released this year already. So I think this might have flown under the radar of a lot of kaiju fans, but it's definitely worth checking out. Kaiju Wars is essentially, as developer Foolish Mortals explained, it's a modernization of the classic Godzilla 2 War of the Monsters game for NES. It's like Advance Wars meets Godzilla. It's a tactical RPG, sort of mixed with tower defense, and it features these kind of gorgeous, stylized comic book visuals and funky kaiju designs. I haven't picked it up yet, but it appears to have a ton of depth, allowing you to strategically build and deploy units to attack kaiju, or to simply, be destroyed by them. It might make sense to throw loads of tanks in front of a kaiju to slow it down, to deal damage. I definitely recommend checking it out on PC, and I hope it comes to console eventually as well. So there are plenty of kaiju games out now. There's still a ton that I haven't talked about, but let's see what's coming out in the future. Here's a sample of some of the ones we know about. So first off is Terror of Hemosaurus. This is from the talented developer by the insane Super Blood Hockey. So this game looks and plays like what a true modern update to Rampage should be. and has some incredibly satisfying explosions and physics interactions. You've got 4 playable characters and the ability to enact mass-scale violence on loads of cities. It's launching on all major platforms later this year. It's definitely worth checking out, especially for the multiplayer. A warning, though, it's called Terror of Hemosaurus because of, like, hemoglobin. Like, it is, when you squish people, they spray out loads of pixelated blood. So if you're squeamish, maybe check out a different game. But this one looks to be really fun. I'm pretty sure everyone knows about Gigabash. This is also playable, I think, downstairs in the games room. Yeah, there's a demo. So this is another Kaiju title that's been a long time coming. So Passion Republic Games is a Malaysian studio, mostly known for like studio support work. Like they worked on games like Uncharted, making models and doing animations. Gigabash is their first original game. So despite the game being unreleased, I got to play it back at TGS 2019, and I got to meet CERN, the president of Passion Republic Games. The game's really fun, and it evokes a real Showa Ultra Kaiju feel to it. And the gameplay is kind of like if you've played Power Stone. Any Power Stone fans here? Nice. Yeah, well, we haven't gotten a Power Stone game in like 20 years. Gigabash is the new Power Stone. It's a lot of fun. And it has a hilarious cast of characters, including an overweight Ultraman and a building, like a building fighting Kaiju. I guess it's time for revenge. Look forward to it. It's going to release on PC, PS4, and PS5 later this year. This was a surprise announcement. So, following a Monster Rancher 1 and 2 re-release on the Nintendo Switch last year, Ultra Kaiju Monster Rancher was announced for release globally later this year. And it takes the mechanics and gameplay from the classic Monster Rancher games, and it infuses it with the Ultra Kaiju from the Ultraman series. This is actually going to get a North American English release, but if you want a physical copy, you're going to have to import the Asian or Japanese versions, and it's been confirmed that the Asian version will have English support as well. It also has Kaiju Fusion, so you can mix Kaiju together. Releasing later this year is Kaiju, a Kaiju dating sim by Squiddershins. I don't know much about this game. I don't know much about how it will play, but it looks gorgeous, and the premise is really funny and cute. You actually go on dates by smashing cities with another Kaiju. Definitely one to keep an eye on. I'm pretty interested in seeing how it turns out. And then the last game that we know about, or that I know about, is called Project GG. So this was revealed in 2020 with a teaser trailer. This is from Platinum Games, who are famous for games like Bayonetta and Metal Gear Rising. And this is their first ever independently published video game. And it serves as the final cap to what's called the Superhero Trilogy. That also includes Beautiful Joe and Wonderful 101. Not much is known about this game besides the fact that it's based on Ultraman. The first 2 entries in the trilogy are based on Kamen Rider and Super Sentai. Platinum is one of my favorite video game developers, so I have really high hopes for this game, and Bayonetta 3 is coming out later this year, and it also features Kaiju, because Hideki Kamiya is like Kaiju and Tokusatsu obsessed. So that's all for now. I think I probably have to let the next person up on the panel, but there are plenty of other Kaiju games. There will be future panels as long as there are future G-Fests. Thank you very much. I think I can take like 1 or 2 questions. In the front there. I covered those in the previous panel, actually, and I've got an extended article on Control All Monsters about that. So, yeah, they were physical puppets. It's pretty cool. All right, I better pack up here, but thank you all for coming.